Hi, welcome. Last class we spoke a little bit about different programming languages. Specifically, we spoke a little bit about how the web works, that my browser downloads files off of the internet, and it just reads those files, and we've got HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So I'm going to start this class by giving a quick demo of what HTML, CSS, and JavaScript each do, and then we are going to go on to using JavaScript to build a web server, and I will explain what that means as things go on. So we're going to just start by creating a new folder. So we're going to have a nice little projects folder, which we do already have our general projects folder, but I don't have it on this computer. So for now, I'm just going to create a new web example. And this is going to be part one of this class is just going to be a basic cover of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So I'm going to open this folder in Visual Studio Code, and as we spoke about in the class, once I open something in Visual Studio Code, you'll see that the name of the folder is open up top. If you don't see the folder there, or if you see the wrong folder there, you can always do File, Open Folder, and then you can browse to. So like I would browse to, sorry, it's actually on my desktop, right? And then I go to my web example. So make sure you're inside the folder that you want to do, and you do select folder. This is the same on Mac and Windows. There's no difference there. All right, so I've got my folder open. I'm going to start by making a index.html page. Now, the reason why you'll see that the first HTML page is always called index is that is how web pages work. What I mean is that the way the internet works is it's a bunch of pages connected to each other, and you click on a page and you download that page, or you download a different page, and whenever you go to a different route, you're saying you download a page. Now, where we start from is we start from the index, because this is just a whole directory of files and folders, and so we start from an index. In this particular case, my index is going to be an HTML file, so I'm going to teach you a little trick. Built into Visual Studio Code is something called Emmet. Emmet as Emmet abbreviations, which is there's a shorthand syntax where I can just type one little key, so I will do that again. And this is on Mac and PC. Oops, sorry about that. What I do is I just go Shift 1, so that's an exclamation point, and then I push the Tab key, or I select the Emmet from here and I push Enter, and it pops out this entire thing. Now, the way Emmet works in general is like I could do, if I want to do 5 H1s, and don't worry if you're not sure what an H1 is, I'll explain all that in a moment. I do H1 times 5 and I push Enter. Excuse me, and it creates 5 of those. But, so for now, we're just going to really quickly do that. We're going to do that. We'll do an Emmet abbreviation. We're going to delete the head. And so now we have a very basic HTML page. HTML is hypertext markup language. I believe we already spoke about exactly what that means, which is basically just that my HTML is some text that has some markup around it. So for example, if I want to write the word, so if I just want to write the word hello, but I want the word hello to show up in the browser in like a nice as a nice big header, right? I want the word welcome. Welcome to be a header on my website, right? I'm just going to snooze those for like an hour. So I should be able to do this without all the AI suggestions popping in my face. So I want to do this. I just want to do a basic web page. So now I'm going to reveal in File Explorer, and this is if I want to actually see where the file is. In Mac, this would be Show in Finder instead, but it's the same idea, which is just basically show me where the file is located. Then I click on the file, and it opens in my browser. Now, despite me not putting anything else into the page, I just literally wrote the word welcome. My web browser is pretty smart, and my web browser adds the HTML tag, and adds the head, and adds the body, and says, hey, this welcome text obviously is inside of HTML and inside of a body, and obviously if it's HTML, it also has a head and a body. We don't want that, right? We want to actually do this We don't want that. We don't want our browsers to try to guess what this page is supposed to be. We want to make the page do what we want the page to be proper. So right at the top we say, hey, this is an HTML page. Then we do an HTML tag over here, and then inside the HTML tag, we've got a body tag. Now this body tag is where I am going to write the body of the page. So we've got in HTML pages, we've got a head and a body. The head is where you get the information about. The head is where we get the information about the page, and then the body is where we actually see the thing in the page. So we look at the body to see what's there, and we look at the head to see the information about what's in the body. So in this particular case, we're not going to even have a head because there's no information yet, so we don't need a head. Instead, we're just going to do in the body, we're going to do an H1, which is a heading 1, and we're going to do that same word, welcome, and I'm going to close my H1 tag. So this is a hypertext markup language, right? Which means it's a markup. HTML is a markup language. Markup means I take my text and I mark it up. I add stuff around it to identify specific pieces of it to be able to do other stuff with it. So in this particular case, what am I doing? I'm doing, what is the thing that I'm doing here? I am making I'm using the word welcome. I'm putting the word welcome and I'm making it inside of a header. So if I save this page, now an important point here is whenever we look at a page, we need to reload it. So if I refresh my page, now welcome, we can see is inside of a body, inside of an H1 tag. I'm sorry. Hello. I'm being interrupted by the cat. Sorry about that. I was interrupted by the cat who did not want to appear on camera and decided to run away the moment I said hi to him. So we've got an H1 tag. Now, aside from the H1 tag, there are a bunch of other tags. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm going to talk through a few more as we keep going with this. But our tags will give us some basic styling. So for example, if I want a paragraph, I would do a P tag. And that would give me a paragraph, and I would say, this is a website with nothing on it. I think insert is on. Yeah, my mistake. I'm sorry about that, folks. That is why I kept losing my tags, and I'm sure I wasn't looking at the screen, so y'all were laughing at me without me knowing, but that is what was happening there. So once again, I made the changes. I saved the file. I do Control-S, or on a Mac, Command-S, or we go File over here, and we do Save. But that is not enough. Until I actually go over here and refresh the page, this change does not show up. I'm going to zoom in a little bit just to make it clearer. I'm going to close this thingy, which is the inspector, which shows the details. So if I refresh, now this is here. I've zoomed in quite a little bit so that it's clear on the screen what's going on, but you can still see that I have a paragraph and a header. Now, what if I want to change the color of the font, right? So if I want to change the color of the font, or I want to change the font itself, or I want to change the size of paragraphs or something like that. To do all of that stuff, what we need to do is we need to do styling. We have to add styles. So what do I have? I've got cascading style sheets. I've got CSS. CSS is how I add styles. Now CSS can be written inside of HTML. I can go the same way I declare my HTML tag. I can declare a head. And inside the head, I can declare a style tag. And inside the style tag, I can write some CSS. So you'll notice that because I'm writing CSS, I'm actually using a different syntax. When I say syntax, you'll see it looks totally different, right? So if I say the color of my H1 is going to be blue. Let's see, blue. It's not like a... And then we refresh, and then I refresh my page, and that is blue. Don't know how clear it is that that's blue. Just to make it more obvious, let's make it, we're going to use RGB, which is a way of doing colors, which is red, green, and blue, and mixing those three colors between each of those colors we can have in them either 0 or 255, anywhere in that range, and that basically combining red, green, and blue, you can make any other color. Maybe not any, but we can make a bunch of other colors. So I'm going to do 12, 120, and 200. I save that, and that is just a different shade of blue. So that does not accomplish what we want to accomplish because we want this to stand out a lot more. So we're going to do a ugly bright green. I have to save, and I'm going to refresh my page, and now it is very obvious that my welcome is in a bright ugly green. All right, so I've got my H1, and I've got my style. So I've got my style. That is CSS, except I don't want it to be in this page. I want to use the same style for my entire website, so I want to share it across multiple pages. So how do I do that? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to, first off, is this should really be indented one. Okay, I'm going to, instead, I'm going to create a new file called a style.css. And inside of this style.css file, I'm going to write the same thing I wrote before, which is I wrote for my h1 tags, I would like them to have a color of RGB, and we'll try to make it a more reasonable color this time. So we'll do 1, 2, 3 for starters. And then once I do that, it shows me that's a shade of black, but because Visual Studio Code is really nice, it has this built-in little color picker, which is what I was using, which is, this is a feature of Visual Studio Code. It has a nice little color picker, so I can do like a nice little orange and save that. Now, if I refresh my page, this is not orange yet. Why is it not orange yet? Because I need to link the HTML and CSS file. Right now, I've got my HTML file being loaded. Right, when I clicked on the HTML file, loaded it from the folder where it was. But now I need to actually add my CSS to this project. I need to add the CSS file. So how do I do that? Inside my head, I need to link. Link CSS. So what do? This is a link, so it's a link tag, and this is a different kind of tag than we've seen before. This is a tag with no end. This is just This is just an informational tag by itself. It says I need to link something. The relationship between that file and this file is that is a style sheet. And then for href, for the hypertext reference, meaning, hey, this is where you actually find the link. This is that hyperlink. This is where you find it. We find it in /style.css. / means look over here. Start in this folder. So right next to me, you'll find style.css. So right next to the index file, you'll find the style.css file. And I can save that. And we will talk more about paths and how to discuss relative paths and things like that as we program a little bit, but I want you to understand this is really important. The / saying that means here, / means here, and then style.css means that's the name of the file. This is where you're looking for it. If I were to put it into a public folder, so if I were going to create a folder called public, meaning that it's the files that are accessible publicly over the internet, I'm going to move the style.css into there. So now we see I've got this style.css file inside of a folder. So now it's not in now it's /public/style.css, right? Because it is over here looking for the folder of public, and then inside that folder of public, look for style.css. So now I have my style sheet. I'm going to refresh my page, and now it works. Because we are linking the style sheet and we give exact directions to it, the browser knows, oh, I downloaded that HTML page, great. Now I'm going to download the CSS as well. These are the fundamentals of HTML and CSS. There's a lot more to them, and you're going to need to understand that a lot more. You're going to have full classes on HTML and CSS, but since we're dealing with web browsers, you need to understand the fundamentals that HTML is text with this HTML is text with markup, right, with these little tags around it to identify different parts of the text, and then CSS is the style, is how we adjust the style and add things to the text, etc., and it's got a bunch of stuff to it. If you would like a quick reference on HTML and CSS, look up w3schools.com. I always make this mistake. It is not W3School, it is W3Schools. W3schools.com, right? This nice website, not that weird ass other shit that I just showed you all by accident. You've got an HTML page. We've got a section on HTML. We've got a section on CSS. So if you look at the HTML, it'll go through in depth. It'll give you an entire Learn HTML Now, and it'll give you an entire course in HTML, including like styles and paragraphs and different elements and what they mean by element. We've got elements and we've got attributes. We've got links, and then we've got like some CSS stuff. And then if we go to CSS itself, it talks all about selectors and fonts, and there's a lot of stuff inside of CSS, including pseudo elements and pseudo classes. There's a bunch of stuff here, and it is important to understand this stuff eventually, and eventually you will learn all this stuff in great depth. But for now, I'm going to just leave you with, hey, use W3 Schools as a great study resource, and that's the basics of HTML and CSS. This is the end of part 1. Part 2, which I'm going to make into a separate video, but part 2 of this is going to actually start writing a web server. What is a web server? This HTML file that I put over here is just a thing sitting on my computer. That's all this is, right? This is just an HTML page. It sits on my computer, and my browser can open this file and read it. That's how a browser works. A browser is a program that reads HTML and CSS. But what we want to be able to do is we don't just want to be able to read the HTML and CSS. We want to be able to make it so that anyone anywhere in the world can read the HTML and CSS that we put together. We also don't just want it to be static, meaning we don't want our pages to just have the same basic information. We want to make them dynamic. We want to be able to give different information based on certain things. Like if you think about most of the websites you use today, right? Like you go to any social media site, it's the same basic HTML and CSS, but the content changes a lot, right? Like any social feed where you're just scrolling through stuff, any Blue Sky or Instagram or Reddit, anything like that, where you're just scrolling through a bunch of posts. All of those posts are actually exist because you've got some detailed things in there, right? You've got a bunch of really cool technology running behind the scenes, and that's what we're going to build. What we are going to build is we're not just building basic websites. We're building things that eventually make HTML and CSS, and if you ever get confused about what we're doing, I want you to remember that it all comes back to that very basic HTML and CSS. But the reality of the situation is that we're not writing HTML and CSS. We're going to write JavaScript, or we're going to write Python, and that JavaScript and that Python is actually going to show you, is actually going to build a web browser. It is not build a web browser, sorry. It is going to build a web server, which is a program that sits on a faraway computer that you can request the pages from. It's a lot of big words. I will demonstrate how all that works soon. As you know what, I'm not going to do part 2 as a separate video. I'm going to continue part 2 as part of this video, but think of it as a separate moment. All right. So we are going to build a web browser. So the programs you need Node.js, right? So we've got Node.js. Right, you just get Node.js right here. Get Node.js, and you're going to download it if you're on Windows. You can download the Windows installer if you're on Mac. You can download the Mac installer if you're on Mac OS. You don't want to be using Docker. You want to be using Brew. Except that this is an unofficial version, so for Windows you want to use for Windows and Mac you still want to use the installer over here. We're going to use just these installers. These are the easiest ways to do it. Download this installer, run it. There's a couple of options you got to select. I'm not going to go through it in great detail right now. I recommend getting version 24, which is the current one. If not, get version 22, which is the long-term support version. Long-term support means that it will be Node will promises to make sure that it stays running for quite a while. Don't worry too much about that. Once you have Node installed, you can test that Node is installed, and we've done this last week, so sorry, I just realized I'm not showing you my screen. Right, so Node.js. Node.js and download, and yes, this is where the installer for Node.js comes from. Now, aside from Node.js, we're using Visual Studio Code, which I've already used in this course, and we've discussed these programs last week. But you need Visual Studio Code. Download it for your computer. You don't have to use it. You can use a million other tools. I'm going to recommend Visual Studio Code. All my lessons are going to be in Visual Studio Code unless I explicitly tell you otherwise. And this is just a really good tool to use and just a cool tool to get used to because, like myself, plenty of people use this professionally. This is like a professional tool, and there's no real there's no reason not to use it. So I'm actually going to open Visual Studio Code right now. And we had this web example, right, which I want to close this project. I'm going to go File, and I'm going to go File, and I'm going to close that folder. And then I'm going to open folder. I'm going to go into I'm going to go back onto my desktop, and I'm going to create a new folder here. And I'm just going to call my new folder Express. Let's just call it JS site or JS server. So this is where I'm going to have my JavaScript server. So I'm going to open this folder. Right now, there is nothing in my server, right? Nothing in my sleeves, nothing in my server. The first thing I want to do is I want to make this into a node project. What does that mean? It means that I want to be able to manage my project with Node. We've spoken about Node. Node lets us write JavaScript code without needing to use JavaScript, without needing a browser. It is just a tool that reads JavaScript. It's called a JavaScript runtime environment. So what we're going to do is we're going to initialize a Node project. One moment, and I will demonstrate how to do that. All right. So, npm init node package manager initialize. I am going to zoom in. Hopefully that's big enough. If it's not, you can always zoom in on the file, and you can complain to me, and I will send you the code that I use specifically. But in this case, we're going to write npm init just to show you where I'm running it. I'm not writing it in a file. I'm clicking this little thingy over here, which opens up this window on the bottom, and making sure I selected the terminal. The terminal is just a built-in terminal to this folder, the same way that this program is a terminal. A terminal is just a way of interacting with your computer, not using the basic Explorer, but actually using a command line tool, and it lets you access the command line programs, which we can verify that Node is installed by doing node -- version, and I push enter, and I see that I'm currently running Node 22.14.1, which is a little bit behind, but that's fine, and then I do npm init, and I push enter. This is going to take a couple minutes, but what this does is this initializes a program. This initializes a Node program. What does that mean? I'm going to say package name is going to be Node.js, version is going to be 1, description, a basic Express web server. Entry point is going to be index.js. There's going to be no test command, no git repository, no keywords. Author, I'm going to put as my name. You can put it as your name if you would like. And then license, I'm going to do ISC. Type is going to be common.js. Do not worry about that. Do not worry about what. So we're going to show you the file. So all that running that command did was it created this file. This file is a information file, meaning that this file tells us some basic information about this project. And whenever you open a project in any environment, whenever you show up, and in any case you show up and you have a project about Node that is a Node project, find the package.json folder, find the package.json in the project, open it up and read it. You will learn to read it, you will learn to understand it, it will make sense to you, and everything else will be much easier. So, the important thing is you've got scripts. Now what scripts do is they are commands that you can run. So in this case, we're going to have a start script, and that start script is going to be node index.js. What does that mean? It means that, hey, when I say npm start, when I say, hey, node package manager, I want you to start my program, what it's going to do is it's going to go index.js, and it's going to run the index.js file. So right now, if I go npm start, and it says, no, I cannot find index.js file because the index.js file does not exist, right? Error, cannot find module server dash, right? Index.js. So what do? I go over here and I create a new file and I call it index.js. So this is a very basic JavaScript file. Now, since I have this JavaScript file, I may as well put something in it. So we're going to start with a very basic example just to make sure that this works. We're going to console.log. Yeah, we'll just do hello world, right? And this is just a very basic program to see that my JavaScript file is working. So now, once again, I'm going to push up in my terminal, and I'm going to push, so we've got npm start again, and I'm going to push enter to run npm start, and now it says, hey, we're using this program and node index.js, and then we do, oh, hello world, and it works now. No errors, no nothing. It prints out exactly what I want it to print out. That is spectacular. Now, things are about to get very complicated very quickly, because what I would like to do is I would like to actually create a web server. Now, I do not write the code for a web server from scratch. Instead, what I do is I use a tool that already exists. In this case, the tool that I'm going to use, is called Express. Express.js is a library, and a library is just a fancy word for someone else's code. So I would like to use the Express.js library to build my web server. So what all of that means will make more sense as we do this. So we do npm, we're going to do npm install express. I'm saying, hey, node package manager, I want you to install Express. Now, I want you to notice what happened. Two things happened when we did that. One, this package.lock file appeared. Well, a few things happened. One is a package.lock file appeared, and it's got a bunch of stuff in it. What does all that stuff mean? Well, I'll explain in a moment. The other thing we've got is our package.json now has dependencies. What are dependencies? Dependencies are other packages, other projects, other pieces of code that other people have written that are required in order for me to use my particular project, to use this project. So if anyone wants to come along and use this project, they need all the code that I give them, which is going to be the index, right? And there's also this node modules folder, which has got a bunch of stuff in it. Sorry, 1 second. Now, this dependencies list is all of the stuff that this project needs to run. Now, you'll notice that it just says Express, but that's not really true because Express itself, right, if I look at, so I downloaded Express. So if we scroll over here, you'll see one of the things is I downloaded Express. Now, inside Express, Express also has a package.json. And if I open the Express package.json, see it's got a bunch of contributors and a bunch of basic information about them, but Express has a bunch of dependencies, which basically means when I actually install Express, I need to install all of these things too. And if we go into some of these things, you'll see that those have other dependencies, and so on and so forth. And because all of these things will have different dependencies, and I need to install all of them, and in order for my program to run, we end up with this long list of dependencies. We end up with this long list of different versions of the project. So how do we make sure that whenever someone else comes and uses our project, they get the exact right version? We have this package.lock.json. Package.lock.json says, hey, when you install, hey, npm, hey, node, when you install the project, right, you're going to get Express, but I need you to know that this is the package lock. This is the exact version of Express. So node module /accepts, I actually got version 2.0.0. I got it from this particular place. And if you want to check that it's valid, you can use a SH512 checksum. You can do an integrity check with this. You can do a checksum with this. I'm not going to explain a checksum here, but that's just details. The license is MIT, and then that has the dependencies, these two things, and the engines, meaning, hey, what version do you need to be running? I need to be running Node, at least the version 0.6, which is a really old version of Node, but that's what I need, right? And sometimes those versions might be a lot newer. So now we've got a dependency. Now I'm going to actually create my web server really quickly. I am going to just copy paste some code, and that is going, and then I will explain, and then I will run it. I will show you what a web server does, and then I will try to quickly explain the code. And then I will stop the video here because we've been running for 30 minutes, and I understand that you guys are probably getting tired. So really quickly, npm start. Remember, when I do that, all I'm doing is saying, hey, Node, read this file. So I do npm start, and it says, hey, local example app is now listening at port 3000. Great. You don't know what that means? Don't worry about it. It means I can go to my web browser, I can open a new thing, I can go to localhost 3000, and I push enter, and it says, hey, hello world. Now, I can change hello world to this is from the server. I'm going to save that, and I'm going to refresh this, and it's still showing hello world. What do I have to do? I have to turn off the server, turn it back on, and now I refresh, and now the code change has the effect. So it's not just that I needed to turn off the server. Let me zoom in just to make sure that you all can see this. It's not just that I need to turn the server on and off. I actually needed to refresh it and do a bunch of other stuff. What are we actually doing here? What we are doing is we have some code here. This is const express equals require express. So the first thing I do is I load in express. So these are variables, and in programming, one of the most basic things we have is a variable. And a variable is just a way to refer to some data. So we load something, we run a program, we do a thing, we get some information, and then we use variables to store that information. So express, require express. That's going to load in the express. Then I'm going to create an app, which is, hey, express, run the code so that we now have an express app running. So the first is I just load in the information. The other is I actually create the web server. The last thing I do is I have port 3000 is literally just the number 3000. I will explain what ports are in another lesson, but basically they are how networking works. They are tied to networking. There's a lot of details potentially attached to it, but the basic idea is they're just how networking works, and I will give you a lecture on networking at another time. This video is running long. Now, app.get, I will explain why it's the word get, but it basically my app, which is, remember, my Express app that I built, which is my web server. So now we say, hey, web server, when someone tries to get the home page, which is the base page, which is, no URLs, nothing fancy. It's just if someone tries to get the best page, you're going to run this little function, which means you're going to do this block of code. What does this code say? There's a request and a response. So whenever we have anything over the internet, we send some information, we get back some information. So there's the request, which is, hey, give me this information. The response is we send some data back. And sometimes we check the request to make sure it has the right information. There's a lot of stuff that goes into this, which we will cover down the road. But for now, all I do is I say, hey, I'm going to do a request. I take in a request and a response, and I say, hey, response.send. So, hey, just send back. I don't care what the request is. Just send back for the response. Send back this little string. Send back this bunch of characters, which in this case this is from the server, right? So, hey, send back saying, hi, this is from the server, so they know that something happened. Now, the last thing we do is we do app.listen, because until the web server is listening, because the way it works is we download a file, right? So one way to download a file is you just look on your hard drive, you find a file, you open that file up. The other way to do it is you say, hey, I need to get something from someone else's computer. In order to get something from someone else's computer, someone has to be listening for you when you ask for something, right? So you say, hey, I'd like to get something. Think of it like someone ringing on the phone, right? So someone rings on the phone, you need to actually be there to pick it up, as opposed to like a text that you can read and respond to later. But until Someone's there to read the response. You're just sitting there twiddling your thumbs, waiting, being left on red, which nobody likes. So app.listen is a function, which means it is a block of code, and it needs two things. It needs a piece of information of where should I listen. So that's what the port is. The port is saying, hey, listen at port 3000. And the other thing is, hey, once I finished listening, what should I do? This is called a callback, which is a kind of function or a way to use a function. So we're using this block of code. We're saying, hey, what do I do once I'm done listening? And we just say, hey, once I start listening, and once you start listening, once the server is all set up, we just print out example app listening on port and then the port number. And that's all it does. So this line, example app listening on port 3000, is just printing out what we said over here. That's all there is to it. This is just a very, very, very basic web server. Now, no one on the internet can access this web server. By the way, to stop it, we press Control-C. Whenever we want to close a program inside the terminal, we press Control-C. On Mac, you also press Control-C. You do not press Command-C. This is just a standard thing. And it's the same, yes, Command-C is in the same thing that you would use to copy somewhere else. Excuse me. So, at its core, that is all a web server is. We create that is all we're doing. We load in the library that we're using, which in this case is Express. We create the app. We say, hey, app, I need you to take in all this information. When somebody asks for the home page, this is what you give them. And then, hey, app, I need you to listen at port 3000. So then the app starts listening at port 3000 as long as it's running. And whenever someone knocks on the door at port 3000, they immediately give them back, hey, this is from the server. That's all there is to it. There's a lot more. It gets a lot more complicated, and we're going to go into a lot more detail. But at its core, that is the basics of the internet. There's HTML and CSS, which is the kind of stuff that your browser presents. And then there's the web server, which is the thing that sends the data, that listens for stuff and then sends it to your computer. As always, if you have any questions, you know how to reach me on Mio and Omnivox. Otherwise, I'll be, we will have one more class that is going to be video next week. It'll be just another video going into a bit more depth and building this out. I will make the code available to you guys, and good luck. When I do make the code available, this is an important detail, I'm not going to include the node modules folder. So you're going to need to run npm install. When you get the code, you're not going to run npm install express. You're just going to run npm install, and that will give you that will download, if you have Node installed properly, that will actually download all of the related projects, all of the related code for you. All right. On that note, have a good week.